In the haunted halls of Shadowmoor Manor, where a deadly curse feeds on your deepest fears, when one man dares to unravel its secrets, why is Hercule Poirot, the master of logic, trembling? Who's behind the murders, cloaked as a vengeful wraith? And what dark truth binds a cast of strangers, each hiding a motive, a secret, a fear? Settle in for a story of betrayal. Share in the comments where you're tuned in, and hit subscribe to keep the suspense alive. Chapter 1. The Invitation to Shadowmoor Manor. The autumn wind whispered through the skeletal branches of the oaks lining the Thames as Hercule Poirot adjusted his impeccable moustache in the reflection of his polished silver cigarette case. It was a crisp afternoon in London, the kind where the fog clung to the cobblestones like an uninvited guest, and Poirot found himself contemplating the peculiar envelope that had arrived at his Whitehaven mansion's flat that morning. Sealed with a wax crest, depicting a raven perched on a crumbling tower, it bore no return address, only his name scrawled in elegant, looping script. Monsieur Poirot, the letter began, your reputation as the unrivaled master of deduction precedes you. I humbly request your presence at Shadowmoor Manor this weekend, where a matter of grave importance awaits. Discretion is paramount. Lives may depend on it. Yours in anticipation, Lord Elias Harrington. Poirot's little grey cells stirred with intrigue. Lord Harrington, an eccentric aristocrat rumoured to dabble in occult relics from his expeditions to Egypt and the Orient. Shadowmoor Manor, perched on the misty cliffs of Devon, was infamous in society whispers for its isolation and the Harrington family curse, a spectral entity said to feed on the deepest fears of its victims, driving them to madness or death. Poirot snorted softly. Superstition. The human mind was the true labyrinth, twisted by greed, jealousy, and deceit. Still, the invitation piqued his curiosity. Why him, and what grave importance lurked in those fog-shrouded halls? He telegraphed his acceptance, and, by evening, boarded the express train to Exeter, his valise packed with essentials, a bottle of Cliffs, mingled with the earthy scent of impending rain. A butler, gaunt and expressionless as a marble statue, ushered him into the grand hall. Monsieur Poirot, intoned the man, whose name was Graves, fittingly sombre. His lordship awaits in the drawing-room. The room was a cavern of opulence, tinged with decay, crystal chandeliers dimmed by dust, Persian rugs frayed at the edges, and walls lined with portraits of stern Harrington ancestors, whose eyes seemed to follow one's every move. A fire crackled in the massive hearth, casting flickering shadows that danced like restless spirits. "Ah, the great Hercule Poirot!" boomed Lord Elias Harrington, rising from a wingback chair. He was a tall, wiry man in his 50s, with a shock of silver hair and eyes that gleamed with manic energy. His tweed suit hung loosely, as if he'd recently lost weight, and a scar traced a jagged path across his left cheek, a souvenir from some forgotten adventure. "I am honored, sir. Truly. Allow me to introduce our little gathering." The guests were an eclectic assembly, each introduced with Harrington's theatrical flair. First, Lady Vivian Ashcroft, a raven-haired beauty in her 30s, draped in emerald silk that accentuated her piercing green eyes. She was Harrington's niece, recently widowed under mysterious circumstances. Her husband had plummeted from those very cliffs during a storm. "Charmed, monsieur," she purred, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Next, Dr. Reginald Thorne, a portly psychiatrist with a bushy beard and spectacles perched on his nose. "Specialist in phobias and the subconscious," Harrington explained. Thorne nodded curtly, his gaze appraising Poirot as if dissecting a specimen. "Fascinating to meet a man who solves puzzles of the mind through logic alone." Then came Marcus Blackwood, a slick financier with oiled hair and a predatory grin. Harrington's business partner in some shadowy import venture. Money makes the world spin, eh, Poirot? But here it's fear that turns the gears. His laugh was too loud, echoing off the panelled walls. Miss Elena Voss, a frail medium within us, manifesting as a wraith that strikes without mercy. 3 generations have fallen, madness, suicides, accidents, all tied to their deepest terrors. Lady Vivian shivered dramatically. Uncle, must we dredge this up? My poor Arthur, he was afraid of heights, you know. And then that fall. Dr. Thorne interjected, his voice measured. Fascinating psychologically. Phobias as weapons, repressed traumas exploited. But surely, Lord Harrington, you've summoned us for more than ghost stories. Harrington's eyes darkened. Indeed. Lately, the manifestations have returned. Whispers in the night, shadows that move of their own accord. I've received threats, anonymous notes claiming the curse will claim me next, unless I reveal a family secret. I fear one among us may be orchestrating this for gain. Inheritance, perhaps? Or revenge? Blackwood scoffed. Preposterous. It's market rivals trying to spook you out of our deal. Miss Voss closed her eyes. No. I sense a presence. Ancient. Hungry. Captain Langley pounded his fist. Load of rot. Show me proof. Poirot listened silently, twirling his mustache. The little gray cells whirred. Motives abounded. Vivian's widowhood suggested insurance or inheritance. Thorne might experiment on vulnerable minds. Blackwood's finances could hide debts. Voss could be a charlatan. Langley, a hired enforcer. And Harrington himself. Why invite a detective, if not to deflect suspicion? He dismissed the supernatural with a wave. Messieurs, mesdames, the curse is but a smokescreen. Human ingenuity creates far more terrifying illusions. We shall uncover the truth through method and order. The group murmured assent, tension easing slightly as dinner was announced. The meal was exquisite. Roasted pheasant with truffle sauce, asparagus in hollandaise, and a vintage Bordeaux that even Poirot approved. Conversations flowed. Vivian regaled them with tales of Parisian soirees. Thorne debated Freudian theory with Poirot, who countered with his own insights on the criminal psyche. But as the clock struck 10, the atmosphere shifted. A distant rumble of thunder heralded the storm, and the candles flickered as if breathing. Then, from the hasn't set in. Recent. Langley barred the door. No one leaves until we sort this. Harrington trembled. Poirot, what madness is this? Poirot rose, his voice steady as Belgian steel. Not madness, mon ami. Murder. But fear not. Hercule Poirot is here. We shall lock the doors, post watches, and tomorrow, with the light of day, logic will illuminate the shadows. For now, retire with caution. The game has begun, but it shall end in truth. The group dispersed uneasily, whispers trailing like ghosts. Poirot lingered, scanning the room. An overturned glass, a crumpled note under the bed reading, "Your fear betrays you." His own hidden dread of tight, suffocating spaces from a boyhood mine collapse stirred faintly. But he quashed it. Order restored, fragile as the mist outside, he retired to his room, the manor's secrets coiling tighter around them all. Chapter 2. Whispers of the Past. The morning after the gruesome discovery in the drawing room, Hercule Poirot rose early, his impeccable moustache twitching with the faint scent of intrigue that lingered in the air like the fog outside Shadowmoor Manor. The first victim, Lady Harrington's nephew, had been found with a look of abject terror frozen on his face, a single puncture wound at the base of his neck. No weapon in sight, no signs of struggle. The local constable had been summoned, but delayed by the relentless mist, leaving Poirot to navigate the web of suspicions among the guests. Lord Harrington, the host with his wild mane of silver hair and eyes that darted like trapped birds, had insisted on breakfast in the grand dining hall. The room was a cavern of polished oak and crystal chandeliers, but the atmosphere crackled with unease. Poirot observed the assembled company. The sharp-tongued widow, Mrs. Evelyn Thorne, clutching her pearls, the brooding artist, Victor Lang, whose ink-stained fingers betrayed a nervous habit, the enigmatic medium, Madame Isolde, with her veil of mystery, and the young heiress, Clara Beaumont, whose porcelain features hid a steely gaze.
He found a stack of yellowed diaries, bound in cracked leather. The entries, penned by Lord Harrington's great-grandfather in the 1800s, spoke of a spectral devourer, a ghostly apparition said to manifest from the manor's fog-shrouded moors, preying on the deepest fears of its victims until they perished from sheer terror. One passage chilled even Poirot's rational soul. It comes in the night, wearing the face of your nightmare. For me, it was the endless void of the sea, from which I barely escaped as a boy. It drowned me in visions until my heart gave out. Poirot stroked his moustache thoughtfully. Superstition, perhaps, but the parallels to the nephew's death, his known phobia of needles, and that puncture wound were uncanny. As midday approached, the guests gathered in the conservatory, a glass-domed oasis of exotic plants that offered a false sense of warmth against the encroaching chill. Tensions simmered like a pot about to boil over. Madame Isolde, her dark eyes gleaming, broke the silence. We must share our fears, lest the spirit sense our weakness and strike again. I, for one, dread the silence of the grave, eternal isolation. Victor Lang snorted, his paint-flecked hands gesturing wildly. Fears? Mine's heights. Fell from a scaffold once as a lad in Paris. Nearly broke my neck. But this ghost nonsense? It's a killer among us, playing games. Clara Beaumont leaned forward, her voice a soft tremor. Spiders. Ever since one nested in my dollhouse as a child, their webs like invisible traps. Her eyes flicked to Poirot, who remained impassive, though inwardly he felt a twinge. His own dread, claustrophobia, born from being trapped in a collapsed mineshaft during a youthful adventure in Belgium, mirrored these confessions in subtle ways. Enclosed spaces, like webs or graves or endless voids, all spoke of entrapment. Mrs. Thorne chimed in sharply. Failure, losing everything in a bad investment, like my late husband did. But enough prattle. Someone here is exploiting these tales for murder. Dr. Crow nodded. Must be. Poirot's eyes narrowed. No, no. There is always a way. Observe the key. He pointed to the misplaced key on the table, slightly askew. It should have fallen if turned from outside. Unless... With a flourish, he produced a thin wire from his pocket and demonstrated. Threading it under the door, he nudged a hypothetical string attached to the key, pulling it back after locking. The group murmured in awe. "But who?" Clara demanded. Poirot smiled enigmatically. "That, mademoiselle, is the question. The killer used knowledge of Victor's fear, perhaps overheard or deduced, to stage a hallucination. A projector hidden in the vent? A drugged incense? We shall see. But this clue eases our suspicions. The ghost is flesh and blood, manipulating us all." As evening fell, the fog thickened outside, casting elongated shadows through the windows. The survivors reconvened in the drawing room, where a fire crackled defiantly. Lord Harrington poured brandy with a trembling hand.
Poirot, you've given us hope. But we're still trapped here with a murderer.
Indeed, milord, Poirot replied, sipping his tisane. Yet knowledge is our weapon. Let us form an alliance. Pair up for the night. Watch each other's backs. No one wanders alone. Madame Isolde raised her glass. To unmasking the fiend. I've sensed discord, but together we might prevail. Dr. Crow agreed. Logical. I'll pair with Mrs. Thorne. We can discuss alibis. Clara glanced at Poirot shyly. And I with you, monsieur? Your mind is our greatest asset. Poirot bowed slightly. Honored, mademoiselle. But remember, trust is tentative. Eyes open. As they dispersed, whispers of strategy filled the air. Mrs. Thorne suggesting they inventory the manor's hidden passages, Dr. Crow offering to analyze any suspicious substances. For the first time since the scream, a fragile camaraderie emerged, born not of friendship, but necessity. Poirot retired, his voice booming yet laced with a tremor. We cannot sit idle while this malevolent force stalks us. Madame Ilara here claims expertise in communing with the beyond. A séance, she proposes, to summon the spirit and demand answers. Madame Ilara Voss, a willowy woman in her 40s, with raven hair pinned in an elaborate chignon and eyes shadowed by kohl, nodded solemnly. She was a self-proclaimed medium from Vienna, invited for her reputed ability to bridge the veil between worlds. Her gown, a cascade of midnight silk embroidered with esoteric symbols, rustled as she rose. The spirits are restless, she intoned in a husky accent. They whisper of unfinished business, but beware. Invoking them may reveal truths none wish to face. Poirot leaned back in his armchair, fingers steepled. He had dismissed the notion of ghosts as folly, yet the group's desperation was evident. There was Dr. Elias Thorne, the burly physician with a perpetual scowl, nursing a brandy. Miss Lydia Beaumont, the young heiress whose porcelain features hid a steely resolve. Colonel Reginald Fitzroy, retired military man with a limp and a quick temper. And the reclusive artist, Victor Lang, whose ink-stained fingers fidgeted endlessly. Each harbored secrets Poirot knew, unearthed from whispers in the corridors. Very well, Poirot said at last, his voice calm and measured. If it will ease the minds, let us proceed. But remember, mes amis, the human mind is the greatest trickster of all. The group arranged themselves around a circular table draped in black velvet, candles flickering in silver holders, casting elongated shadows on the paneled walls. Madame Ilara placed a crystal orb at the center, its facets catching the light like trapped stars. She instructed them to join hands, forming a chain of reluctant unity. Poirot, seated between Lydia and the colonel, felt the chill of Lydia's palm and the colonel's calloused grip. Close your eyes, Ilara commanded. Breathe deeply. We call upon the entity that haunts.
Faintly, or so it seemed in the dim light. Ilara's eyes rolled back, her body convulsing lightly. The spirit speaks through me, she moaned. It says, the one who fears the dark will fall next. Dr. Thorne's face paled. That's absurd. I have no such fear. But Poirot's thoughts turned inward. His own unspoken dread of enclosed spaces, born from a childhood incident in a collapsed mine shaft during a family outing in Belgium, stirred like a dormant beast. How could this spirit know? Unless a low moan filled the air, emanating from nowhere and everywhere. Victor Lang bolted upright. Did you hear that? It's her, the apparition from the diaries. The moan crescendoed into words. Justice.
for the forgotten. Lydia screamed as her chair jolted backward, nearly toppling. Chaos erupted, hands broke apart, accusations flew. "Enough!" Poirot's voice cut through like a blade. He rose, his compact frame commanding authority. "This is no spectral visitation, but clever deception. Observe." He strode to the wallpaper seam, pressing firmly. A panel swung open, revealing a narrow passage concealed behind. Dust motes danced in the revealed space, and from within came a faint echo of the moan, amplified by some acoustic trick, perhaps a hidden speaking tube. "Monsieur Lang," Poirot said, turning to the artist, "your hands are stained, not just with ink, but with charcoal, ideal for marking hidden levers. And you, Madame Elara, your convulsions were too theatrical, your messages too conveniently vague yet pointed." Elara's composure cracked. "How dare you!" But before she could protest, Dr. Thorne fainted dead away, slumping to the floor with a thud. The group rushed to him, Lydia fanning his face with a handkerchief. Poirot knelt, checking the doctor's pulse. He is unharmed, merely overcome by fright. Or perhaps by guilt? He straightened, addressing the room. The rapping? A foot pedal beneath the table, operated by an accomplice. The cold draft? A bellows in the passage, pumping chilled air from the cellars. And the voice? A gramophone recording, hidden, and his nyctophobia from wartime trenches. Thorne, reviving with a groan, nodded weakly. "It's true. But I swear, I've harmed no one." The group murmured, relief washing over them like a balm. Lord Harrington poured brandy for all. "Poirot, you've saved our sanity. If this ghost is but human trickery, then the killer is flesh and blood, vulnerable to your logic." Poirot accepted a glass, though he sipped sparingly. "Précisément. The hidden passage links to the locked room from earlier, explaining the impossible death. We must explore it at dawn. For now, rest assured, no phantom prowls these halls. Only a cunning mind we shall soon unmask." As the clock struck midnight, the guests retired, conversations turning from dread to speculation. Lydia paused at the door, touching Poirot's arm. "Monsieur, you seemed unsettled during the séance. Is there a fear you hide as well?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Ah, mademoiselle, even the great Poirot has his shadows, but they are conquered by the light of reason." The drawing room emptied, leaving Poirot alone by the fire. He traced the passage's edge, his mind already piecing together the next thread. The night had rattled him more than he admitted, the confined passage evoking buried memories. But it had also forged a fragile trust among the survivors. The ghost was human, yes, and tomorrow would bring it into the open. Yet, as he ascended the creaking stairs, a faint, unexplained chill lingered in the air. Poirot dismissed it. Superstition, nothing more. But in the depths of Shadowmoor, secrets whispered still, waiting for the dawn. Chapter 4. Shadows in the Library. The library of Shadowmoor Manor was a cavernous sanctuary of forgotten wisdom, its towering oak shelves groaning under the weight of leather-bound tomes that spanned centuries. Dust motes danced in the slivers of afternoon light filtering through the leaded windows, casting elongated shadows that seemed to whisper secrets of their own. Hercule Poirot, his moustache impeccably waxed despite the mounting horrors, stepped into this realm with the precision of a surge of Thorne, the flirtatious actress Lila Beaumont, and the reticent banker Mr. Reginald Croft. Alliances shifted like sand. Poirot began his methodical search, his gloved fingers tracing spines embossed with gold. He pulled down a volume on cryptography, its pages yellowed and crisp. "Ah, the art of hidden words. So likes a human heart, full of ciphers waiting to be broken." As he delved deeper, his keen eyes spotted an anomaly. a shelf slightly askew, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside lay a bundle of letters tied with faded ribbon. The envelopes bore no stamps, only elegant script addressing various guests. Poirot's pulse quickened as he deciphered the first. A simple substitution cipher, child's play for his little grey cells. The letter to Victoria Langford read, "Your indiscretion in Paris 1912 with the Count. Pay or perish. Blackmail." Another to Dr. Thorne. The stolen artifact from the Nile expedition. Silence has a price. And one to Lila Beaumont. The director's wife knows. Your career hangs by a thread. Poirot pocketed the letters, his mind racing. These are not the work of a ghost, but of a serpent among us. But who holds the pen? He summoned the guests to the library, his voice cutting through the manor's oppressive silence like a bell. They assembled reluctantly, eyes darting suspiciously. Lord Harrington arrived last, his face flushed. "Mes amis," Poirot began, pacing before the grand fireplace, "we are not alone in our sins. Someone here weaves a web of extortion, using the shadows of the past to ensnare the present." Victoria's hand flew to her throat. "What nonsense! You're accusing us?" "Not accusing, mademoiselle. Revealing." Poirot produced the letters with a flourish, laying them on the mahogany table. Gasps echoed as each recognized their own missive. Dr. Thorne's face darkened. "This is outrageous!" "Who dares?" Lila Beaumont, her rouge unable to hide her pallor, snatched hers. This mentions Brussels. We must—" A thud interrupted him. Madame Voss, who had been lurking by the window, crumpled to the floor, her lips blue, a half-empty teacup shattered beside her. Foam trickled from her mouth. "Poison!" Lila screamed. Poirot knelt swiftly, checking her pulse. "She is gone. Mon Dieu, the killer strikes amid our discord." Panic surged. Victoria backed away. "Who brought the tea?" "It was you, Croft." Croft paled. "I poured for everyone. Mine is fine, see?" He sipped his own, unharmed. Poirot examined the cup, sniffing the residue. A rare toxin, swift and subtle. Not cyanide, something exotic, vegetal, the bitterness masked by sugar. His eyes narrowed on the library's botany section. He rifled through, pulling a tome on tropical flora. Ah! Curare? Number. Wait, Daturus Ramonium? Too common. Here, Gimpy, the stinging tree from Australia. But no, the symptoms, convulsions, blue lips. Ah, yes, Aconitum napellus, monkshood, deadly in minutes. But where? Dr. Thorne demanded. Poirot's mind whirred. The greenhouse. Lord Harrington, you boast of exotic plants from your travels. A wolfsbane variant, perhaps? Harrington nodded reluctantly. Yes, I collected specimens, but the greenhouse is locked. Keys can be duplicated, Poirot said, or stolen. We must investigate. Leaving Voss's body covered with a throw, they hurried to the greenhouse, a glass-domed Eden attached to the manor's east wing. Inside, humid air thick with floral scents enveloped them. Poirot scanned the labeled pots. Orchids from Brazil, carnivorous pitchers from Borneo, and there, a cluster of purple-hooded flowers. Aconitum ferox, Himalayan monkshood, he read. The root, ground into powder, is lethal. See? Fresh scratches on the soil. Someone dug recently. Lila gasped. But who? Voss was the medium. Maybe she knew too much about the blackmail. Victoria sneered. Or she was the blackmailer. Those letters could be hers. Poirot held up a hand. Patience. The letters were encrypted. Voss claimed spirit. Uneasy camaraderie. Stories of past travels, lightened by wine. Lila even mimicked Voss's dramatic trances, eliciting nervous laughter. For the first time since the screams began, the manor felt less like a tomb and more like a fortress, guarded against the shadows within. Yet, as Poirot retired with Harrington, he sensed the web tightening. The killer, unmasked in motive but not in face, lurked still. Tomorrow would bring more light, or more death. Chapter 5. The Forgotten Attic. The air in Shadowmoor Manor grew heavier with each passing day, as if the walls themselves exhaled secrets long buried. Hercule Poirot, his mustache impeccably groomed despite the chaos, ascended the creaking staircase to the attic, guided by a cryptic note found in the library's encrypted letters. The truth lies where dust reigns. The guests, still reeling from the poison-laced death in the library, watched him go with a mix of awe and dread, their trust in his methodical mind a fragile tether against the manor's creeping terror. The attic door groaned open, revealing a cavernous space cluttered with relics of Lord Harrington's exotic travels. Cobwebs draped like lace over cracked trunks, faded tapestries, and strange artifacts glinting faintly in the sliver of moonlight piercing a grimy skylight. Poirot's polished shoes clicked on the warped floorboards, each step stirring dust that danced in the dim glow. His heart quickened, not from the mystery, but from the oppressive weight of the low, slanted ceiling. A childhood memory flickered. Trapped in a coal cellar, walls closing in, his small hands clawing at unyielding stone. He shook it off, adjusting his tie with deliberate calm. Logic, mon ami, logic. He began his search, sifting through a jumble of artifacts. A jade idol with unblinking eyes, a tarnished sextant, a tribal mask with a leer that seemed to follow him. His fingers brushed a leather-bound journal, its pages brittle but intact. Inside, Lord Harrington scrawled detailed expeditions to distant lands, but one entry stood out, a reference to a cursed relic tied to the family's months ago, naming an obscure cousin as Lord Harrington's sole heir, cutting out the guests downstairs. The ink shimmered unnaturally, as if freshly penned. A forgery, perhaps. Poirot's mind raced, piecing together motives. Greed was a familiar thread in this tangled web. Suddenly, a low groan reverberated through the attic, not human, but structural. He spun, heart lurching as a massive beam overhead cracked, showering splinters. Dust choked the air, and the skylight's meager light flickered. Instinct screamed to flee, but the narrow path back was blocked by a toppled cabinet. His breath caught, the walls seeming to pulse inward. Non, Hercule, you are not that boy. He forced himself to focus, calculating the beam's trajectory. With a nimble sidestep, he dodged as it crashed inches away, splitting a crate of porcelain masks into shards. Panting, he steadied himself against a pillar. The collapse revealed a hidden alcove, its contents untouched by dust. A small altar adorned with candles, a dagger, and a vial of amber liquid. The setup reeked of ritual, but Poirot's keen eye spotted a modern twist, a tiny mechanism beneath the altar, wired to a hidden speaker. A theatrical touch to fuel the curse myth. Someone had gone to great lengths to stage fear. He gathered the will, the key, and a sample of the amber liquid, suspecting it tied to the greenhouse's exotic plants. As he navigated back through the debris, the attic seemed less suffocating, his fear subdued by the clarity of discovery. He descended to the drawing room, where the guests awaited,
their faces pale under the chandelier's glow.
"Monsieur Poirot, what did you find?" demanded Clara, the sharp-tongued heiress, her fingers twisting a pearl necklace.
Poirot raised a hand, silencing the murmurs.
"Mes amis, the attic holds no ghosts, only truths disguised as such. I have found a will, possibly forged, that reshapes the inheritance of Shadowmoor." He held up the document. Logic. Even the doer butler, Grayson, nodded approvingly. The attic's dangers had forged a fragile alliance, each guest pledging to watch the others, their fears tempered by the promise of answers. As they dispersed, Poirot lingered by the fireplace, the forged will in his pocket a weighty clue. His claustrophobia, briefly stirred, was now a distant echo, overshadowed by the thrill of the chase. The manor's secrets were unraveling, and he sensed the killer's next move was near. Tomorrow he would seek the lock to his mysterious key, perhaps in the graveyard where whispers of the past awaited. For now, the night ended not in terror, but in a quiet resolve. Shadowmoor Manor, with its dust and deception, was no match for Hercule Poirot's little grey cells. The group retired, their steps lighter, bound by a shared purpose to expose the truth before another shadow fell. Chapter 6. Echoes from the Graveyard. The fog clung to Shadowmoor Manor like a shroud, curling around the gnarled oaks and seeping into the bones of the estate. Hercule Poirot, his grey overcoat buttoned tightly against the damp chill, led the wary group of guests toward the family graveyard, a half-acre of crumbling stone and forgotten names nestled beyond the manor's rose garden. The air was thick with unease, the kind that settles when secrets are buried too shallowly. Poirot's polished shoes crunched on the gravel path, his moustache twitching as he scanned the faces behind him, each guest a puzzle piece, each expression a potential lie. Lord Harrington, his face gaunt under the weight of hosting this ill-fated gathering, carried a lantern that cast flickering shadows. Beside him, Miss Clara Vane, the sharp-tongued novelist, clutched her shawl, her eyes darting to the fog as if expecting it to whisper back. Dr. Felix Ramsay, the skeptical physician, adjusted his spectacles, muttering about the folly of traipsing through a graveyard at dusk. Mrs. Evelyn Thorne, the widowed heiress with a penchant for pearls, walked stiffly, her gloved hands betraying a faint tremble. And, trailing at the back, young Mr. Julian Marsh, the blood, avenged by shadow. What a melodramatic epitaph. Poirot turned, his interest piqued. Betrayed by blood, you say? A family feud, perhaps. He knelt beside the stone, brushing away dirt to reveal a faint carving, a crescent moon pierced by a dagger. This symbol, it is not mere decoration. It suggests a story untold. Ramsay scoffed, wiping fog from his glasses. You're reading too much into it, Poirot. Old graves are full of poetic nonsense. People die, they carve their grudges in stone, and the world moves on. Yet the world does not move on for our killer, Poirot countered, his tone sharp. 3 deaths in this manner, each more deliberate than the last. The past is not done with us. As they ventured deeper, Evelyn gasped, pointing to a freshly disturbed grave. The soil was uneven, as if clawed at by desperate hands. Poirot crouched, his fingers tracing the loose earth. This is recent. Someone has been here, and not for mourning. Julian, lingering near a yew tree, shifted uncomfortably. Who'd dig up a grave? That's madness. Or purpose, Poirot said, standing. He motioned for Harrington to bring the lantern closer. The headstone read, Cedric Harrington, 1872 to 1902, lost to the shadows. Below it, another crescent and dagger symbol. Poirot's eyes narrowed. "This Cedric, was he your kin, Lord Harrington?" Harrington's face paled. "My great-uncle. He vanished after a scandal, something about a contested inheritance. The family assumed he fled abroad." "Assumed," Poirot murmured, but did not confirm. "Let us see what truths lie beneath." With a shovel borrowed from the gardener's shed, Poirot and Ramsay carefully dug into the loose soil. The guests watched, their breaths visible in the cold air. After several minutes, the shovel struck wood. A collective gasp rose as they uncovered a splintered coffin. Empty. "Mon Dieu," Poirot whispered. "Cedric Harrington did not rest here, but someone wished us to believe he did." Clara's voice trembled. "You think the killer staged this?"
Quickening, not from fear of the dark, but from the memory of a childhood locked in a cramped cellar, the walls closing in. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task. At the bottom, a small chamber held a wooden chest, its lock rusted but intact. Poirot opened it to find a bundle of letters, their edges yellowed, but the writing clear. The topmost letter bore the crescent and dagger symbol, and a chilling message. "The heir lives, hidden in plain sight." "An heir," Poirot said aloud, his mind racing. Cedric Harrington had a child, perhaps, one the family erased from history. This could be the motive, jealousy over a claim to Shadowmoor. Before he could read further, a grinding noise echoed above. The slab slammed shut, plunging them into darkness. Evelyn screamed, and Julian's voice rang out, "The door's locked!" Poirot's pulse spiked, the old terror of confinement clawing at him. He forced himself to breathe, his voice steady. "Calm yourselves. This is a trap, not a tomb." His fingers traced the walls, finding a loose stone. With effort, he dislodged it, revealing a hidden latch. The slab creaked open, and light flooded back. The group scrambled out, hearts pounding. Ramsay, panting, glared at Julian. "You were nearest the door." "Did you trap us?" Julian's eyes widened. "Me? I was trying to help." "Enough," Poirot snapped. "The trap was set before we arrived. Someone knew we would find this chamber." He held up the letters. "These speak of a hidden heir, a secret worth killing for. We are closer to the truth, but also to danger." Back in the manor's drawing room, the group gathered around a crackling fire, the fog pressing against the windows. Poirot spread the letters on a table, deciphering their cryptic references to a child born out of wedlock, raised in secrecy. "This heir," he said, "may be among us, or known to one of us. The killer seeks to protect or destroy this legacy." Clara, her novelist's mind spinning, ventured, "What if the heir doesn't know their own identity? That would explain the murders. Someone silencing anyone who..."
Chapter 7. The Masquerade Ball. The air in Shadowmoor Manor thrummed with a peculiar energy, as if the very walls anticipated the night's revelry. Hercule Poirot, ever the orchestrator, had proposed a masquerade ball to lure the killer into a misstep. The grand ballroom, with its towering chandeliers and faded tapestries, was transformed into a stage of shadows and secrets. Masks adorned every face, their glittering veneers concealing motives as much as they did identities. Poirot, clad in a simple black domino mask that accentuated his piercing gaze, moved through the crowd like a chess master, surveying the board. Lord Harrington, his silver hair crowned with a feathered Venetian mask, greeted guests with a forced joviality. "Tonight, we cast aside our fears," he proclaimed, raising a glass of crimson wine. The guests, each a suspect in Poirot's meticulous mental ledger, echoed his toast, their voices a cacophony of strained cheer. Among them were Lady Evelyn, her emerald mask glinting with menace. Dr. Carver, whose skeletal mask seemed too apt for his gaunt frame, and Miss Clara, the young heiress, whose porcelain mask hid eyes that darted nervously. The orchestra struck up a waltz, and the room swirled with silk and velvet. Poirot, ever observant, noted how the masks emboldened the guests. Whispers grew sharper, glances lingered longer, and hands brushed with intent. He glided toward Miss Clara, who stood alone by a gilded mirror, her reflection fractured in its cracked surface. "Mademoiselle," he said softly, "a mask may hide the face, but the heart, it speaks in other ways, does it not?" She flinched, her fingers tightening around her fan. "I don't know what you mean, Monsieur Poirot. I'm just here to enjoy the evening." Her voice wavered, betraying a fear that piqued his curiosity. "Enjoyment is a fine pursuit," he replied, his tone light but probing. "Yet I wonder if you fear the shadows tonight, or perhaps what they conceal." Her eyes widened behind her mask, but before she could respond, music resumed, though the mood had soured. Poirot moved swiftly, his small frame weaving through the dancers. He found Miss Clara near the terrace doors, her mask now clutched in her hand, her face pale. "Mademoiselle, a word," he said, guiding her to a quiet alcove. "This scarf, it is yours, is it not?" She hesitated, then nodded. "It was a gift from Lady Evelyn. She gave it to me yesterday, said it suited my eyes." Her voice cracked. "But I wouldn't—" "Calm yourself," Poirot said, his tone soothing yet firm. "The truth, it is like a melody. It cannot be hidden forever." He studied her, noting the tremble in her hands, the way her eyes avoided his. A jealous rival, perhaps, or a pawn in a larger game. As they spoke, another commotion erupted. Lord Harrington's voice boomed, "She's gone! Miss Clara's maid, Anna, she's vanished!" The guests murmured, their masks now seeming more like shields than disguises. Poirot's mind raced. Anna, the quiet maid who'd lingered in corners, her eyes always watchful. He'd suspected she knew more than she let on. He led the search to the servants' quarters, where a trail of scattered rose petals, strewn from the ball's decorations, led to a narrow staircase. At its base lay Anna, her body still. A silk scarf identical to Lady Evelyn's knotted tightly around her neck. The guests gasped, some turning away, others whispering accusations. Poirot knelt beside the body, his fingers tracing the scarf's knot. It was deliberate, precise, a message. "Mon Dieu," he murmured, standing. "This is no ghost's work. This is vengeance." His eyes scanned the crowd, landing on Dr. Carver, whose skeletal mask now seemed a grim omen. The doctor had been near both incidents, his medical knowledge a potential tool for murder. Yet Poirot's instincts whispered of a deeper motive. He gathered the guests in the ballroom, the chandeliers casting long shadows. "Mes amis," he began, his voice steady. "Tonight, we unmask not just faces, but truths. This scarf, it is a thread in a of Lady Evelyn's schemes to secure Edward's inheritance. When Clara arrived, a new heir, the threat rekindled old wounds. The scarves, symbols of affection, turned to tools of death." Lady Evelyn lunged forward, her mask falling. "Lies! I loved Edward. I'd never—" "Enough!" Poirot's voice cut through. "Your jealousy, madame, led you to silence Anna, who could expose your manipulations. The scarf was meant to frame Clara, but your haste betrayed you." The guests stood stunned as Lady Evelyn's defiance crumbled. She confessed, her voice a broken whisper, admitting to strangling Anna to protect her secrets. The scarf meant for Clara had been a miscalculation, dropped in panic. Poirot signaled to the footmen, who restrained her gently. As the night waned, the masks came off, both literal and figurative. The guests, shaken but relieved, gathered around Poirot. "You've saved us," Miss Clara said, tears in her eyes. "No," Poirot replied, his voice soft. "It is the truth that saves. We are all vulnerable, but together we overcome." The ball ended not in dance but in catharsis, as confessions and apologies wove the group closer. They shared stories of their own fears, finding solace in shared humanity. Poirot, ever the observer, slipped away, his work done, leaving the manor a little less shadowed. Chapter 8. Secrets of the Cellar. The air in Shadowmoor Manor grew heavier with each passing day, as if the very walls exhaled suspicion. Hercule Poirot, his impeccable moustache twitching with purpose, stood at the threshold of the cellar door, a rusted iron slab that seemed to guard secrets older than the manor itself. The previous days had been a whirlwind of revelations, murders, hidden passages, and a curse that, despite his rational disdain, gnawed at the edges of his composure. His own buried fear, a childhood terror of suffocating confinement from a near-fatal entrapment in a collapsed barn, stirred uneasily as he eyed the narrow staircase descending into darkness. The group had gathered in the dining
with a flourish. It is in the forbidden that we find the forbidden truths. The little grey cells, they demand exploration. Captain Hugh Langley, his limp more pronounced today, leaned on his cane. Damned fool's errand, if you ask me. But if there's answers down there, I'll guard the door. No one's slipping past me. Marcus Blackwood, the financier, smirked, though his usual bravado faltered. Careful, Poirot. You might find more than cobwebs and old wine. Harrington's been cagey about that cellar for years. Lord Harrington himself stood apart, his scar stark against his pallid face. It's merely storage, barrels, crates from my travels. But there are rumors of smugglers' tunnels from centuries past. I've never explored them. Dr. Reginald Thorne, ever the skeptic, adjusted his spectacles. Psychologically, cellars represent the subconscious, repressed fears, buried secrets. Fitting, given the curse's modus operandi. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then let us confront this subconscious, no? Monsieur Blackwood, Captain Langley, you will accompany me. The rest, remain vigilant above. The cellar door creaked ominously as Poirot led the way, a lantern in hand casting jagged shadows on the moss-slicked stone walls. The air was thick with mildew and salt, the distant crash of waves suggesting proximity to the cliffs. His heart quickened, not from superstition, he assured himself, but the oppressive closeness of the space. The steps spiraled downward, each one narrower than the last, until they reached a cavernous chamber lined with barrels and crates, some stamped with exotic symbols from Cairo and Shanghai. Mon Dieu, Poirot murmured, his voice echoing. A veritable museum of secrets. Blackwood kicked a crate, dust billowing. Harrington's been hoarding more than port. Look at this. Jade statues, gold trinkets. Smuggled, I'd wager. Langley, stationed near the stairs, growled, Focus, man. We're not here for treasure hunts. Poirot's keen eyes scanned the room, noticing a faint draft from a corner where a barrel stood slightly askew. Composure. But the little grey cells prevailed, urging him forward. The tunnel widened into a smaller chamber, its walls lined with shelves holding ledgers and a locked chest. A single candle burned low, suggesting recent presence. Poirot opened a ledger, its pages filled with meticulous records of shipments, opium, artifacts, uncut gems. Smuggling, as Monsieur Blackwood suspected, he mused. But this is no mere enterprise. These dates align with the deaths attributed to the curse. A sudden scuffle echoed from the tunnel. Blackwood shouted, "Poirot! Behind you!" Spinning, Poirot raised the lantern, just as a cloaked figure lunged from the shadows, a glinting blade aimed at his heart. Instinct took over. He sidestepped, the blade grazing his coat, and swung the lantern, shattering it against the attacker's arm. The figure yelped, a masculine voice, and fled back into the tunnel, leaving a trail of blood. Langley's bellow came from above. "Got him pinned! Move, Poirot!" Scrambling back through the tunnel, Poirot ignored the clawing panic of the tight space, emerging to find Langley grappling with a wiry man in a servant's uniform, not one of the manor's staff. The stranger's sleeve was torn, blood seeping from where the lantern had struck. "Who are you?" Poirot demanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. The man spat, his eyes wild. "You'll get nothing from me. The curse protects its own." Blackwood, panting, joined them. One of Harrington's smugglers, no doubt, protecting his dirty empire. Poirot's mind raced. The ledgers, the attack, the note, it all pointed to a conspiracy deeper than he'd imagined. He bound the man's wrists with a cord from a crate, his hands steady despite the lingering tremor of his brush with confinement. "We shall see what truths you hide, monsieur. For now, you are our guest." They hauled the prisoner upstairs, where the others waited anxiously. Harrington's face drained of color at the sight. "Jasper? My old steward? Impossible," Vivian gasped. "He was dismissed years ago, after stealing from the estate." Thorne stroked his beard. A disgruntled employee, perhaps seeking revenge through this curse of brandy. Vivian raised her glass. "To Monsieur Poirot, who braves even the darkest depths for truth." Poirot inclined his head, a faint smile playing on his lips. "To truth, madame, which shines brighter than any curse." They drank, the warmth of the brandy and the camaraderie easing the night's terrors. Jasper's capture was a triumph, a concrete step toward unraveling the manor's mysteries. For now the group retired with a fragile sense of victory, their trust in Poirot cemented, the cellar's secrets no longer invincible. Chapter 9. The Stormy Night. The storm descended on Shadowmoor Manor like a vengeful deity, its howling winds rattling the ancient windows and lightning slashing the sky with jagged fury. Hercule Poirot stood at the edge of the drawing room, his silhouette framed against the tempest outside, his mustache a resolute line despite the chaos. 8 days into the deadly game at the manor, 3 guests lay dead, each death cloaked in the guise of the spectral devourer, a supposed curse that preyed on fears. Yet Poirot knew better. The killer was human, cunning, and intimately aware of the group's deepest dreads, including his own buried terror of enclosed spaces. The remaining guests huddled around a flickering candelabrum, the electricity long since knocked out by the storm. Lord Harrington's silver hair was disheveled, his bravado eroded by sleepless nights. "This cursed weather," he muttered, pouring another glass of port. "It's as if the manor itself conspires against us." Clara Beaumont, the young heiress, clutched a shawl tightly, her eyes darting to the shadowed corners. "It's not the storm, my lord. It's the killer, waiting for us to crack." Madame Isolde, the medium, traced a pendant nervously. "The spirits are restless tonight. I feel their weight pressing in." Dr. Elias Crow, ever the skeptic, scoffed. "Spirits? It's the wind, Isolde, and a murderer who's playing us like pawns." Mrs. Evelyn Thorne, the widow, snapped. "Enough bickering. Poirot, what do we do? Another night like this, and we'll all lose our nerve." Poirot turned, his eyes gleaming with calm determination. "Mes amis, fear is the killer's weapon.
amplified by this storm. But we shall turn the elements to our advantage, search the manor. Every creak, every shadow may hide a clue. Stay in pairs and report anything unusual. As thunder roared, they split into teams. Poirot paired with Clara, whose sharp mind he'd come to trust, despite her initial reticence. They ventured toward the west wing, where the storm's ferocity seemed to shake the very walls. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and something metallic, almost electric. Poirot's heart quickened, not from the storm, but seemed slightly askew. Poirot's keen eyes caught the irregularity. "Regardez," he whispered, pulling a hidden lever. A panel slid open, revealing a compartment stuffed with letters tied in red ribbon. He scanned one, his brow furrowing. Correspondence between Lord Harrington and an unknown party. Demands for payment, threats of exposure, blackmail perhaps? Before Clara could respond, a crackle of electricity split the air. A sconce on the wall sparked violently, its wiring exposed and frayed. Poirot's instincts kicked in. He yanked Clara back as a surge of current arced where she'd stood. "Mon Dieu!" he gasped. "This was no accident." Sabotage. They rushed to alert the others, finding them in the dining hall, where Dr. Crow was examining a shattered chandelier that had crashed inches from Mrs. Thorne. "Someone tampered with it," Crow said grimly. "The bolts were loosened." Madame Isolde clutched her pendant tighter. "The devourer, it senses our fear." "Non," Poirot countered sharply. "This is human malice. The storm hides their movements, but we are closing in." He held up the letters. "These suggest a motive, financial ruin perhaps, or a secret worth killing for." Lord Harrington's face paled. "Those are private. Where did you—" "Truth does not respect privacy, milord," Poirot said coolly. "Someone here knows more than they admit." As the group debated, a piercing creak echoed from the ceiling. Poirot's gaze snapped upward just as a trapdoor swung open, dropping a tangle of old netting that reeked of mildew. Clara gasped, her spider phobia flaring, but Poirot steadied her. "A distraction," he muttered, scanning the room. In the chaos, he noticed Madame Isolde slip toward the hall, her movements too deliberate. "Madame!" he called, pursuing her into a narrow servants' passage. The walls closed in, his breath catching as his claustrophobia clawed at him. But he pressed on, catching her wrist. "You move with purpose. What do you hide?" Her eyes widened, then softened. I was checking," but with a hopeful dawn. Madame Isolde remained quiet, her eyes distant. Poirot noted it, but let the moment pass. The stories wove a fragile warmth, the group huddling closer as the candles burned low. The storm subsided to a drizzle, and the manor's creaks felt less ominous. Poirot's own fear, though stirred by the tight passages, retreated under the weight of his resolve. "We have faced the night," he said, rising. "The killer hoped to fracture us, but we are united. Tomorrow, we pursue these letters' origins. For now, rest in pairs, doors locked, eyes open." Clara touched his arm. "You kept us steady, monsieur." "Thank you." He inclined his head, a faint smile breaking through. "It is the little grey cells, mademoiselle, and the courage we find in each other." As they dispersed, the manor felt less like a trap and more like a battlefield where they held the line. The night ended not in terror, but with a renewed trust, fragile yet defiant, as the first hints of dawn glowed faintly beyond the fog. Word count 1,197. Chapter 10. Allies and Betrayals. The fog over Shadowmoor Manor had thickened by mid-morning, cloaking the estate in a shroud that muffled sound and blurred edges. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand foyer, his polished shoes clicking on the marble floor, his grey eyes alert despite the sleepless night. The string of murders, each more audacious than the last, had left the surviving guests on edge, their trust fraying like the tapestries lining the manor's walls. The arrival of Inspector Harold Grayson, a wiry man with a skeptic's squint and a clipboard clutched like a shield, offered a glimmer of order in the chaos. Poirot had summoned him after the cellar chase, hoping an outsider's perspective might cut through the web of deceit. "Inspector," Poirot greeted, his voice crisp as he extended a hand, "you arrive at a moment most opportune. The manor is a puzzle box, and its pieces are human, each with motives."
Then, I've got statements from the local constabulary, but I need your accounts, fresh. Who was where when the last victim, Miss Clara Wentworth, was found strangled in the ballroom? Lydia spoke first, her voice steady despite her pallor. I was in my room, reading. I heard the music stop abruptly during the masquerade, then screams. I ran down and saw her body. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Mademoiselle, your room is on the east wing, oui? Yet you arrived before the colonel, whose quarters are closer to the ballroom? Lydia flushed. I move quickly when alarmed. Grayson scribbled, unconvinced. And you, Colonel? Fitzroy bristled. Polishing my medals in the study. Heard the commotion. Hobbled over as fast as this blasted leg allows. Poirot paced, his hands clasped behind his back. Curious, Colonel. The study's floor was spotless, no polish residue, no cloth. Yet your cane bears a fresh nick, as if struck against something hard. Perhaps a struggle? The colonel's jaw tightened. Are you accusing me, Poirot? Not yet, Poirot replied smoothly. But the little gray cells, they notice. Grayson turned to Victor. Mr. Lang, you were sketching near the ballroom's entrance. See anything odd? Victor's pencil snapped. I saw shadows moving behind the curtains. Thought it was part of the masquerade's theatrics. Then Clara was found, and I froze. Madame Alara interjected, her voice sharp. He's lying. Victor was whispering with Clara earlier, near the conservatory. I overheard them, something about a debt. Victor's face drained of color. That's nonsense. We discussed art, nothing more. Poirot raised a hand, silencing the room. Enough. Let us test these alibis with precision. Inspector, you have the coroner's report? Grayson nodded, flipping his clipboard. Death by strangulation, silk scarf, same as the one from the masquerade. Time of death, roughly 10:15 p.m. Bruising suggests a strong grip, likely male. Poirot's gaze swept the group. Then we reconstruct. Mademoiselle Bowman. Lie! I never... But before he could finish, Madame Alara stood, her composure cracking. It was me, she whispered. I cut the fabric, but not for murder. Victor asked me to, said it was for a costume. I didn't know. Victor's eyes widened. You treacherous! Silence! Grayson barked. Poirot, what's this mean? Poirot's voice was calm, deadly precise. It means betrayal, Inspector. Victor Lang, you orchestrated the scarf's creation, knowing it would implicate Madame Alara if discovered, but you miscalculated. The charcoal on your fingers, found on the scarf's edge, betrays your touch. You strangled Miss Wentworth, did you not? Her knowledge of your embezzlement, uncovered in the cellar diary, threatened your future. Victor lunged for the door, but Grayson was faster, tackling him to the ground. The guests erupted, shouting, as Grayson cuffed the artist. You're coming with me, Lang.
Lydia sobbed, relief breaking through. "Is it over, Monsieur Poirot?" Poirot shook his head. "Not yet, mademoiselle. Victor acted, but I suspect a deeper conspiracy. The diary mentioned a partner, someone who stood to gain from Clara's silence." Harrington paled. "You can't mean—" "I mean nothing yet," Poirot cut in. "But we must search the conservatory. The truth hides in plain sight." The group moved to the glass-walled conservatory, where exotic plants loomed like silent sentinels. Poirot sifted through a pile of fabric scraps, uncovering a hidden ledger beneath a potted fern. "Voilà, voilà," he murmured, flipping it open. "A record of payments. Victor to an unknown accomplice, signed only with a sigil." Grayson squinted. "That's Harrington's family crest." Harrington staggered back. "Preposterous! I'm the victim here." But Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Non, monsieur. You funded Victor's schemes, hoping to eliminate Clara, who discovered your forged will in the attic. Your betrayal runs deepest." Harrington bolted, but the colonel's cane tripped him, sending him sprawling. Grayson secured him, the room falling silent, save for Lydia's quiet turning to the next puzzle. For now, Shadowmoor rested, its betrayals unmasked, its harmony restored. Chapter 11. The Phantom's Lair. The air in Shadowmoor Manor grew heavier with each passing day, as if the walls themselves exhaled the weight of secrets. Hercule Poirot, his eyes sharp despite the late hour, stood before a faded tapestry in the manor's west wing. The fabric depicted a hunt, its threads frayed but vibrant, concealing what he suspected was the heart of the mystery, a hidden chamber. The events of the past days, blackmail letters, poisoned tea, and collapsing beams, had led him here, guided by a trail of subtle clues. Scuff marks on the floor, a draft where none should be, and a cryptic note in Lord Harrington's diary about the lair beneath the stag. "Mon Dieu!" Poirot murmured, stroking his mustache. "The truth hides not in ghosts, but in the ingenuity of men. Let us unmask this phantom." The remaining guests, Victoria Langford, Dr. Elias Thorne, Lila Beaumont, and Lord Harrington, huddled nearby, their faces a mix of dread and reluctant trust. Mr. Croft's absence after his betrayal in the cellar still stung, but Poirot's alliance with the newly arrived Inspector Davies had steadied their nerves. The inspector, a grizzled man with a penchant for skepticism, stood beside Poirot, his lantern casting jagged shadows. "This better not be another wild goose chase, Poirot," Davies growled, adjusting his coat. "I've seen enough of this manor's tricks." "Patience, mon ami," Poirot replied. "The tricks are but a mask for motive. And the motive lies behind this wall." He pressed a knot in the wood panel beneath the tapestry, and with a groan, a section slid open, revealing a narrow stone staircase spiraling downward. Dust swirled, and Poirot hesitated, his breath catching. The confined space stirred his old fear of enclosure, a childhood memory of being trapped in a collapsed shed. He steadied himself, gripping his silver-headed cane. Victoria shivered. "It's like descending into a tomb." Lila, her actress's bravado faltering, clutched her. "Clever, but who's the puppeteer?" Before Poirot could answer, a metallic click echoed. A panel in the floor sprang open, and a net of weighted ropes shot upward, ensnaring Lila and Victoria. They screamed, struggling as the trap tightened. Poirot lunged forward, but a second trap triggered, a blade swinging from the ceiling, narrowly missing him as he dove aside. "Harrington!" Thorne roared, grabbing the lord by the collar. "Your manor! Your traps!" Harrington, pale and sweating, stammered, "I swear, I didn't know. This chamber was sealed years ago, my father's experiments. He was obsessed with illusions." Poirot, scrambling to his feet, sliced through the net with a pocket knife, freeing the women. "Enough!" The killer uses the manor's secrets, but they are not its master. Observe, these wires are new, the oil fresh. This is recent work. He traced a wire to a hidden alcove, where a leather-bound ledger lay open. Its pages detailed payments to a shadowy figure, the broker, for services rendered in fear. Names appeared, guests, servants, even Croft, linked to sums and dates. But one entry stood out. E.V. silenced, greenhouse, 1925. Madame Voss, Poirot whispered. The medium was no innocent. She was part of this, perhaps a partner turned liability. Victoria, rubbing her wrists, glared. So Voss was blackmailing us, and someone killed her for it? Or with her, Poirot corrected. The broker may be among us still. A low hum filled the chamber, and the phonograph sprang to life, emitting a distorted wail. Shadows danced as the mirrors shifted, projecting a ghastly figure, a cloaked specter with hollow eyes. Lila shrieked, and even Davies flinched. Poirot, heart pounding, forced himself to focus. He smashed the phonograph with his cane, silencing the wail, then yanked a lever, freezing the mirrors. "No more illusions," he declared. "The truth is near." But the chamber wasn't done. A wall panel slid open, and a figure darted out, a masked silhouette, cloaked in black, wielding a glinting dagger. His voice steady despite his racing heart. "The poison? The traps?" Lila's eyes darted. "Not all me. There's another, someone bigger, pulling strings. I was just a pawn." Before she could say more, the door behind her burst open, and a second figure, tall, hooded, lunged forward. Davies tackled them, revealing Dr. Thorne, his face twisted with rage. "You idiot!" Thorne spat at Lila. "You were supposed to stay quiet." Poirot stepped forward, his calm restored. "Dr. Thorne, the broker, I presume. You orchestrated this charade, blackmail, murder, and mechanical ghosts to terrify your victims into compliance. But your greed betrayed you. The ledger, the traps, all too elaborate, too traceable." Thorne sneered. "You can't prove it." "Oh, but I can," Poirot said, producing the ledger. "Your handwriting matches the entries." "And the exotic monk's hood? Imported during your Nile expedition, no? You thought fear would hide your crimes. But fear reveals." Davies cuffed Thorne and Lila, who slumped, defeated. The group ascended to the manor's main hall, the oppressive air lifting slightly. Harrington, shaken, offered brandy, and even Victoria managed a weak smile. "You're insufferable, Poirot, but brilliant." As they sat by the fire, the manor's shadows seemed less menacing. The group shared stories, not of fear, but of resilience. Victoria spoke of her charity work, Harrington of his plans to restore the estate. The meal that followed was simple but warm, a celebration of survival. Poirot, sipping tea, felt his own fear, of confinement, of failure, recede. The little gray cells had triumphed again. Yet as he glanced at the ledger, one name lingered, unaccounted for, a shadow still uncaught. The game, he knew, was not quite over. Chapter 12. Unmasking Motives. The drawing room of Shadowmoor Manor glowed under the flicker of a dozen candelabras, their flames casting jagged shadows on the paneled walls. Hercule Poirot stood at the room's center, murder staged to unsettle. Then the locked room, the poisoned guest, the strangled dancer. Each act points to a mind cunning yet desperate. He paused, letting the weight of his words settle, but the clues, The misplaced key, the forged will, the smuggled goods tell a story of greed twisted by resentment. Clara, her pearl necklace glinting, leaned forward. "You're saying it's one of us? Still?" Her voice trembled, but her eyes were sharp, darting to Reginald. Poirot raised a hand. "Patience, Mademoiselle Clara. Let us begin with motive. Lord Harrington's fortune, vast and contested, lies at the heart of this darkness. The forged will, found in the attic, named an obscure cousin as heir, cutting out those present. Yet who benefits most from chaos?" His gaze lingered on Grayson, the butler, whose stoic facade flickered. Grayson bristled. "I've served this family for decades, monsieur. You accuse me?" "Not accuse, Monsieur Grayson. Observe." Poirot held up the brass key from the attic. "This unlocks a safe in Lord Harrington's study, discovered this morning. Inside, letters detailing blackmail against you for skimming estate funds." Gasps rippled through the room. Grayson's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to Madame Vionnet, her mystic airs subdued. "And you, Madame, your séance was a clever distraction, oui? The spectral messages, crafted from gossip you gathered, stirred fear to mask your own inquiries into the will." She flushed, her hands twisting in her lap. Reginald, red-faced, stood. "Enough games, Poirot. If it's me you suspect, say it. I've no patience for your theatrics." Poirot's smile was thin. "Monsieur Reginald, your temper betrays you. The silk scarf used in the masquerade murder. Its pattern matches one you wore 2 nights ago. A jealous rival, perhaps, seeking to eliminate threats to your inheritance?" Reginald sank back, speechless. Eliza, the poetess, clutched her shawl, her voice barely a whisper. "But I've done nothing. I only wrote verses for Lord Harrington." "Précisément," Poirot said, his tone softening. "And yet, Mademoiselle Harrington's daughter. Illegitimate. Hidden. He promised me a share, but the will changed. I found the forged one, planted by Clara to cut me out." She pointed at Clara, who gasped in protest. "I didn't kill anyone. But I stirred the fear, the rumors, hoping to expose her. The scarf, the poison, I saw others use them, but I stayed silent, afraid." Clara lunged forward. "Lies! I never—" "Silence!" Poirot's voice cut like a blade. "Mademoiselle Clara, your affair with Lord Harrington, uncovered in the library, gave you motive to forge the will. But Eliza's confession clears a path. She is not the killer, but her silence enabled one." He turned to the group, his voice low. "The true mastermind is absent tonight. Dr. Mortimer, the physician who vanished after the ball. His rare toxin, his knowledge of the manor's passages, his resentment at being denied a share of the estate, all point to him. The strangled guest? A distraction to flee. But I have wired the inspector. Mortimer will not escape." The room exhaled, a collective release of tension. Reginald rubbed his face, shame softening his bluster. I suspected Eliza, but I was wrong." "I'm sorry, Clara," Chastened nodded. "I forged the will, yes, but I didn't kill. I just wanted security," Madame Vionnet sighed. "And I played the mystic for profit." No more Grayson cleared his throat. "I'll return what I took. I swear it." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Bon. Confession cleanses the soul, no? Tonight we have unraveled a knot, though the final thread awaits Dr. Mortimer's capture." He glanced at Eliza, who wiped her tears. "Mademoiselle, your truth has helped us. You are no villain." The group dispersed, their steps heavy but lighter than before. Eliza lingered, approaching Poirot. "Thank you," she whispered. "I was so afraid of being nothing." Poirot patted her hand. "Fear makes us all hide, mademoiselle, but truth sets us free." As the candles burned low, exhaustion and cautious hope. The air was heavy with the weight of revelations, yet a fragile calm settled as Poirot prepared to unveil the truth behind the murders that had haunted the manor. Lord Harrington, his eyes hollow from the strain of betrayal, clutched a brandy glass, though it remained untouched. Miss Clara Vane, the novelist whose sharp wit had dulled under fear, sat with a notebook, her pen poised but idle. Dr. Felix Ramsay, ever the skeptic, leaned against a pillar, his arms crossed, while Mrs. Evelyn Thorne's pearls clicked softly as she fidgeted. Julian Marsh, the gambler whose charm had frayed, stood by the window, staring into the mist as if it held answers. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice steady and resonant, "the shadows of Shadowmoor have whispered their secrets, and now, with the dawn, we bring them to light. 3 murders, each cloaked in the guise of a curse, have tested our reason. But reason, it prevails." He paced slowly, his cane tapping rhythmically. "Let us reconstruct. The first victim, found after that chilling scream, was poisoned, a calculated act. The second, in the locked room, appeared impossible, yet a misplaced key revealed a human hand. The third, strangled at the masquerade, pointed to jealousy. Each death was not the work of a phantom, but of a mind driven by avarice and vengeance." Clara's voice was tentative. "You've said the killer was after a hidden heir. But who? And why now?" Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Patience, mademoiselle. The graveyard gave us the clue, a forgotten heir, erased from the Harrington line. The letters in the mausoleum spoke of Cedric Harrington's child, born in secrecy, raised in shadow. This heir threatens the inheritance of Shadowmoor itself." Harrington's glass trembled. "My family's history is a mire of greed. But I never knew of this heir." "Précisément," Poirot said, "and that is why the killer acted, to keep the secret buried. Let us examine the motives." He turned to Evelyn. "Madame Thorne, your late husband's wealth came from investments tied to the Harrington estate. A new heir would disrupt that, no?" Evelyn's lips. "Embezzlement tied to the estate's funds." Each clue pointed to one among us. He paused, letting the tension build. "The killer is not a guest, but the one who stood to lose the most. Lord Harrington." A gasp rippled through the room. Harrington's glass slipped, shattering on the floor. "Me? Poirot, you've lost your mind." "Au contraire," Poirot said, his voice like steel. "You orchestrated this charade. The invitation to Shadowmoor, the tales of a curse, the staged séance, all to distract from your crimes. You discovered the heir's existence, a child from Cedric's affair, now grown and unaware of their claim. You feared they'd surface, so you invited us here, planting clues to make the deaths seem supernatural." Harrington laughed, but it was brittle. "Preposterous! Why would I kill my own guests?" "For control," Poirot said. "The first victim, your solicitor, knew of the heir's claim. The second, your cousin, stumbled on the forged will in the attic. The third, a maid who overheard your plans, was silenced at the ball. You used the manor's secrets, hidden passages, rare toxins, even my own fear of confinement, to create chaos." Clara's eyes widened. "The claustrophobia. You knew about it." Poirot's expression softened briefly. "Oui, mademoiselle, a childhood trauma, exploited by our host. In the cellar, the trap in the mausoleum, each was designed to unsettle me, to cloud my judgment. But the little gray cells, they do not falter." Ramsay stepped forward. "Proof, Poirot. You can't accuse without evidence." Poirot produced a crumpled letter from his pocket, its crescent and dagger seal unmistakable. "This, found in the cellar, details your embezzlement, Lord Harrington. You siphoned funds from the estate to cover debts, but the heir's claim threatened exposure. You killed to protect your legacy. Harrington's face twisted. You can't prove I touched that poison or tied that scarf. No, Poirot admitted. But the silk scarf at the ball bore your tailor's mark. The greenhouse key was found in your study. And the mechanical ghost? Only you. Me a story for the ages, Poirot. Evelyn touched Julian's arm. You're the heir. Shadowmore is yours. Julian shook his head, dazed. I don't want it. Not after this. Poirot's eyes twinkled. A wise choice, perhaps. The manor holds too many ghosts, even if they are human. As the group dispersed, Poirot stepped onto the terrace, the dawn now bright and clear. He reflected on the case, on the frailty of greed and the resilience of truth. His own fear, that suffocating dread of enclosed spaces, had been a shadow he'd faced and conquered. Shadowmore Manor, once a labyrinth of deceit, stood quiet, its secrets laid bare. He adjusted his hat and walked toward the waiting carriage, his mind already turning to the next mystery. The human heart, he murmured. It is the greatest puzzle of all. But with logic, even its shadows yield to light. The manor faded into the mist behind him, and with it, the echoes of its dark past. Justice had prevailed, and Shadowmore, at last, was at peace. Resolution at dawn. The first light of dawn crept over Shadowmore Manor, its golden rays piercing the fog that had cloaked the estate in mystery for too long. Hercule Poirot stood in the grand drawing room, his small frame silhouetted against the tall windows, his mustache impeccably groomed despite the sleepless night. The surviving guests, Lord Harrington, Miss Clara, Dr. Carver, and the newly arrived Inspector Grayson, gathered around him, their faces etched with exhaustion and hope. The air was heavy with anticipation, as if the manor itself awaited the final unmasking of its secrets. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, surveyed the room. Mes amis, he began, his voice steady, we have endured a night of shadows, of fear, and of death. But the little gray cells, they do not rest. They have unraveled the tapestry of this tragedy, and now we shall see the truth in the light of day. Lord Harrington, his silver hair disheveled, leaned forward. Monsieur Poirot, you've kept us safe, but who is behind? The second in the locked room was not impossible. The poisonings, the strangulations, the traps, all pointed to a motive woven through the manor's history, a forgotten inheritance, manipulated by greed and vengeance. Inspector Grayson, a gruff man with a skeptic's frown, crossed his arms. You're saying this all ties to that forged will you found in the attic. But who's pulling the strings? Poirot turned to the inspector, his gaze piercing. The strings. They are pulled by one who hides in plain sight, orchestrating chaos while feigning innocence. Dr. Carver, step forward. The room gasped. Dr. Carver, his gaunt face pale, froze. Me? Monsieur Poirot, I'm a physician, not a murderer. Précisément, Poirot said, his voice cutting like a blade. A physician with access to toxins, knowledge of anatomy, and a motive buried in the past. You, Docteur, were not merely a guest. You were the illegitimate son of Lord Harrington's late brother, denied your share of the estate by a will you knew was forged. Dr. Carver's hands trembled. That's absurd. Silence! Poirot's voice thundered, a rare display of fire. The diaries in the library, the encrypted letters, the smuggled goods in the cellar, they all point to you. You discovered the truth years ago. Your father's inheritance was stolen by Lord Harrington's family. You came to Shadowmore not as a guest, but as a reckoning. He gestured to the inspector, who produced a small vial from his pocket, evidence Poirot had shared earlier. This toxin, found in the greenhouse, was not merely a plant's poison. It was refined, stored, and used by you, Docteur, to eliminate those who might expose your claim. Anna, the maid, overheard your plans. Lady Evelyn knew of your lineage. Each death was a step toward reclaiming what you believed was yours. Miss Clara's voice quavered. But the ghostly apparitions, the séance, how? Poirot smiled faintly. A clever ruse. The mechanical devices in the hidden chamber, the spectral messages, they were your creations, Docteur, designed to exploit our...
Approached Poirot, a voice soft. You saved us, monsieur. How do we move forward? Poirot's eyes twinkled with compassion. By living, mademoiselle. By learning from the shadows, but not dwelling in them. This manor, it is no longer cursed. It is merely a place, and you, its people, will give it new life. Lord Harrington stepped forward, his voice steady. Monsieur Poirot, stay. Let us rebuild together. Poirot shook his head gently. My work here is done, mon ami. The little grey cells, they seek new puzzles. But I leave you with this. The human heart is frail, yet resilient. Cherish its strength. The guests gathered around a breakfast table, the tension of the night replaced by tentative hope. They shared stories, not of fear, but of dreams for the future. Miss Clara spoke of opening a school, Lord Harrington of restoring the manor's gardens. Even Inspector Grayson, typically stoic, admitted a fondness for poetry, earning a surprised laugh. As Poirot prepared to depart, he paused at the manor's threshold, glancing back at the towering estate. The fog had lifted, and the air was crisp with promise. He thought of his own fear, now a quiet memory, and of the lives he'd touched. Adieu, Shadowmoor, he murmured, stepping into his carriage. The manor stood silent, its shadows banished, its story closed in peaceful resolution. The journey back to London was quiet, save for the rhythmic clatter of hooves. Poirot opened his notebook where he'd jotted a single phrase. To fear is human. To conquer it is divine. He closed it with a satisfied nod, ready for the next mystery, leaving Shadowmoor Manor to its new dawn.